Hello everyone, Mr. Shepherd here again with some history, and our walk for today is to understand what Stuart life was like in London. Okay, our new topic in history is the Great Fire of London. This was a huge event that changed many things. It happened a long time ago in the past, over 350 years ago. The Great Fire of London happened during a period of time we call Stuart England. The Great Fire of London of September 1666 was one of the most famous incidents in Stuart England. It was the second tragedy to hit the city in the space of 12 months. Just as the city was recovering from the Great Plague, the inhabitants had to flee once again, this time not as a result of disease, but as a result of a human accident. So you might have heard of the Great Plague, the Black Death, where lots of people died in London many years ago. Okay, today we'll be learning what life was like just before the fire. The King of England at the time of the Great Fire was Charles Stuart II. There he is. Okay, so what we're going to do first, we're going to have a look at a video. And this video is going to show us what is London like now in the present day. Okay. So we're at the place where the Great Fire of London started in London, in Pudding Lane. All right, and this is a monument that has been put up to commemorate the Great Fire and the rebuilding of the city. Okay, so let's have a look. All right, so sort of show us around that area. Let's see, they've got some things to commemorate the Great Fire there. So as we're moving around, I just want you to notice, what are the buildings like? And can you see the sort of transport that we've got now with the cars and all different scooters? We've got lots of concrete, haven't we? Okay. Massive sort of skyscrapers, buses going past, people whizzing around on bikes. Right, I'm going to jump a little bit forward. There we go to. Okay. Go back a bit. Alright, so lots of glass, lots of concrete, wide streets, lots of cars, and massive buildings like this one, the Gherkin. Okay. Alright, so that's what London looks like now. Alright, around where the fire started now. Just having a look at some more skyscrapers and things. Okay, so let's see. Here's some pictures of London. Here's a satellite image of above Europe and the UK, and there's London, modern day London. We've got the Thames flowing down the middle there. Okay, again there's a skyline, part of the city. brick buildings, okay, really solidly built buildings, and housing blocks, lots of road and cars moving around, lots of people. All right, okay. Now we're about to go back in time by around 350 years to visit London in the year of 1666. This was a very important year in the history of London. Okay, have a think. What would London have been like in that time? How do you think it would have been different 350 years ago? What sort of things do you think that we would see? Okay, we want to think about how buildings were built. What would they be made out of? What would people have worn? How would they have gotten around? Okay, what might it have looked like? So I'm going to show you now this is like an animation of what it might have looked like back in Pudding Lane 350 years ago. So this is the same area of London 350 years earlier. Okay, this is an animation that people have done. So let's have a look. So notice the houses very close together, very narrow little streets, and you can see sort of cobbled streets, small alleyways. Notice these buildings with the overhanging top story. Okay, very close together. See how there's a small gap there? Okay, these are timber framed houses, so the main part of them are wood, and then they use wattle and daub, which was like a woven pieces of wood that would then be what they call daubed on, like that have animal manure. See here where this is really close. They say that you used to be able to, you were so close to your neighbour across the street, you could reach out and shake their hand at this time during London's history. So the wattle and daub was a combination of, it used to be mud, sand, animal dung, straw, and that'd all be mixed up together, and it'd be daubed over this wattle, sort of woven together pieces of wood, strips of wood. Okay, so these buildings here, especially, are wattle and daub. See, you've got a lot more wood. When you go around the city of London now, you see a lot of glass, a lot of steel in modern buildings. Lots of brick, lots of concrete. Okay, quite a dirty, kind of smelly place at that time, London. There used to be sewage sort of running through the streets and that type of thing. And during this time, just before the fire, they'd had the plague, so they had lots of problems with um, needing to bury people and all that sort of thing. Okay, so that gives us an idea of what London was like back in 1666, just before the Great Fire happened. Okie doke. Right, so we're going to look at some more images of what life would have been like back in 1666. Okay, so this is a 17th century map of London. You can see the River Thames again, okay, like we were looking at before. Right, and a lot more farmland around, okay, and the city's just starting to get built up, but still quite a substantial sort of city of that time. This is a painting of the Thames of London in the 17th century, so 1600s. Okay, and this is St Paul's Cathedral. So this burned down and then in the Great Fire, and they had to rebuild it. Okay, this is a painting of Samuel Pepys. He's a very famous diarist, so he kept a diary. He was a member of Parliament. He lived in London. He kept a very detailed diary from 1660 to 1669. And this diary became one of the most important sources of information about London during this time. So from things like written accounts that people do, we learn a lot more about what life was like and what things went on during that time. This is an artistic impression of the view of 17th century in London, with the present day view in the distance. So you can see here the Gherkin again, and in the background, and then in the foreground we've got 17th century London. So 17th century London, and then London in the modern day in the background. Okay, life in 1666. What would it have been like to be rich or poor? How would people communicate with each other? What would happen if you became ill? How did people get food and water? And what would happen if there was a fire? Okay, people did different sorts of jobs back in the 17th century, okay? People do different jobs today than what they, and jobs were very different back then to what they are now. So we're going to have a look at some of the jobs. We have a chimney sweep. Chimney sweep used to clean chimneys and fireplaces. Children were often used as apprentices because they were small. So back at that time, children used to be used for work as well. They didn't always go to school. It was they were being used as labour for different things. Apothecary dispensed remedies made from herbs, plants, and roots. Blacksmith was a very important but lowly occupation. Blacksmiths forged objects out of iron or steel. They would sharpen weapons and repair cooking utensils. Then you've got rat catchers who went around and caught rats in the city. Then you've got gong farmers who cleaned out toilets. They removed human waste from privies and cesspits because you didn't have all of the modern plumbing like you do today. So back in that time, you used to have someone go around and collect all of that waste. A spinster was a woman who supported herself by spinning wool and linen. And then a chandler made candles. And you have scullery maids, who were the lowest ranked workers in a kitchen. Their job was to clean the floor, stoves, sinks, pots, and dishes in the kitchen. Carpenter made all types of wooden furniture and items. They were regarded as master craftsmen. And then firefighters. There was no organised fire brigade. Firefighting was very basic with little or no skill or knowledge involved. Leather buckets and axes were used to put out fires. And then we've got a fire squirt was also used to put out some fires at that time.